U.S. President Donald Trump says Israel and Iran have agreed to a complete and total ceasefire and that it's to be phased in over the next 12 hours. This comes after 11 days of heavy air attacks between Israel and Iran, with the U.S. joining the conflict over the weekend by bombing key Iranian nuclear sites. And then today, Iran retaliating with an attack on a U.S. military base in Qatar. This is video from Iranian state media of what it says are those missiles being launched at Qatar. The target was the Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military facility in the Middle East. The Pentagon says all of the missiles were shot down by air defenses and that there were no casualties. There's been no official reaction from Iran or Israel to Trump's ceasefire announcement. Sam Sampson is tracking the latest developments from Washington. So, Sam, it was not long ago, maybe an hour ago, that U.S. President Donald Trump posted on social media about what he describes as a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. So everyone's scrambling at that point to get confirmation. And I know this is changing almost minute by minute. What do we know right now?
It really is changing minute by minute, because we just heard of one report where Iran did corroborate that there is a ceasefire. So we will be following this moment by moment. But I want you to take a look at the actual post that we saw from the U.S. president. He's been posting sporadically all day, and then this came in, you're right, like within the last hour. So he begins with, "Congratulations, everyone," in all capital letters. He says there will be a ceasefire between Israel and Iran starting later tonight. And he writes, quote, "On the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will, I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war." Now, he goes on to say that this conflict could have gone on for years, and essentially, now it won't. And he does reiterate this phrase of the 12-day war, trying to coin the phrase perhaps. And it's important to note again that there's been no official response or corroboration from Israel. At this point, we have one report that Iran has said there will be a ceasefire as well. Trump initially said, Ian, that there would be consequences if Iran retaliated. But now we have these latest posts saying, okay, we were ready for Iran's retaliation. Trump called it a weak one, and now we can essentially move on and get to peace, perhaps an act of de-escalation like the world has been calling for. We've heard from numerous world leaders pushing for democracy. That includes Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney. There have been protests around the world calling for peace. In a response earlier today, before this news of the ceasefire, Iran said it won't let aggression against its country go unanswered, but it is willing to negotiate as long as the United States and Israel stop their attacks. And now, if this ceasefire is true and it holds, it looks like there might be the chance for that to actually happen.
Sam, we live in a world, you report in a world where a president of the United States makes a post on social media, in this case, Truth Social, and then we all scramble to try to figure out, is it accurate? What does it mean? And as you say, just moments ago, Reuters news agency quoting one Iranian official saying that, in fact, this ceasefire mediated by Qatar is, in fact, something that Iran has also signed on to. Okay, so given the level of uncertainty and how recently all of this was announced, how are Americans reacting?
Well, I'll tell you, some people are scared of further retaliation. I mean, even there was a guy in my building, and we just had a casual conversation about it on Saturday, saying, what does that mean for here on U.S. soil? Yesterday, Homeland Security put out a bulletin warning of the potential for extremist religious violence should Iranian leaders put out the call after Saturday's U.S. strikes, which may have prompted questions about sleeper cells on U.S. soil to the Attorney General at the Capitol earlier today. Take a listen.
Congressman, I can't talk about that in this setting, but what I can tell you is I know Homeland Security, I know the FBI. They are focusing on doing everything we can to keep our nation safe, and they will continue to do that. It's a frightening time in which we live right now.
I mean, Ian, you said it. We're reporting in a world where we're trying to make sense of what the United States president is saying. But I'm trying to put myself in the position of an American who's just following this, maybe on their way home from work or just before dinner, and trying to follow all of the updates. And this most recent news of a ceasefire might ease some anxiety for the average United States citizen. But politically, things are still pretty tense. Some Republicans were not supportive of the move to strike Iran in the first place, saying they didn't want to get involved in another foreign war, especially, if you remember, since Trump ran on being a peacemaker. Now, whether or not that mission has been accomplished, the Democrats still might not be happy. Some Democrats are saying that Trump should have gotten Congress involved on the decision to strike, saying that they should have voted, that maybe it was unconstitutional for the president not to involve Congress. And there's also still a lot of questions about the attack itself.
What were the results in terms of actually thwarting Iran's capacity to become a nuclear power? And what are the Trump administration plans to avoid another potentially disastrous war in the Middle East, where thousands of American lives are potentially at risk? What is your plan to avoid another foreign war?
Just to bring us back to Thursday, which is when the world heard of Donald Trump's plan to make a decision of whether or not to go and get involved in this conflict, he said he would give a 2-week window. He'll make a decision within 2 weeks. And really, 2 days later, he reveals to the world that he made that decision on Saturday and the attack on these Iranian nuclear sites happened. Now, to be clear, what we're hearing from the Democrats there, the president does have the legal ability to use military force without getting Congress involved, but Congress is the only body that can declare war. But now, if this ceasefire is true and it holds, that may not be necessary.
Okay, Sam, back to your computer and phone and every other device you have to stay on top of the developments
Got it right
on
here.
this. All right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a lot more news we're going to get to, but let's get at least one more voice on this developing story first. As I say, no official word at this point as to how the ceasefire. We've heard it from Donald Trump. We've seen a Reuters report from an Iranian official, and that is it to this point. Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley is a former U.S. ambassador and also had foreign service postings in Israel, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. She is now a senior non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council, and she joins us now live from Cleveland, Ohio. A lot of uncertainty at this point, but President Trump has made that announcement on Truth Social. What do you make of all of this?
Woo! How many days ago did this war start? Keeping in mind from the beginning, this was a war of choice. A war of choice. And if indeed he is able to secure a ceasefire this quickly, and of course we have not heard from the Israelis, then he will successfully, he has plotted the U.S. exit plan, which was absolutely necessary. This was not popular with the majority of Americans. So wrapping it up quickly is exactly what he needs to have happen.
You are very familiar with this region. Among your foreign service postings for the United States was in this part of the world. Are you surprised if, in fact, this A, is a ceasefire, and B, that the ceasefire holds? Are you surprised this happened so quickly after the U.S. bombing those 3 sites in Iran?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I can assure you there are many conspiracy theories flying around. The whole start of the war with Israel, of course, and the U.S. flipping from we had nothing to do with it to the president using the terms we control the skies, the major attack on Isfahan, Natanz, and Fodor, and then this announcement of a ceasefire. And then Israel, what does Israel do? For them, they said it was an existential. They talked about regime change, that was what they were heading for. And then the president makes this announcement. So questions arise. Were the Israelis consulted? Were the Iranians surprised and took advantage of it by saying, yes, we're okay with that. We'll take this ceasefire. They had no good choices other than the tit for tat between Iran and Israel. But we have to see what the Israelis do. And in fact, if all of this was just to distract the world from what is going on in the Gaza Strip, because it's been off the front pages, then our attention gets back there. And we do know that Palestinians have been being killed day by day, even as this has gone on.
As somebody who understands the U.S. Foreign Service, as someone who served as an ambassador representing the United States in Malta, help us decode, if you can, and it's possible that you can't, because I think a lot of rules have changed under the Trump administration, but help us decode even the diplomacy here, where the president would issue such a major statement on social media, and we don't get official confirmation, at least we haven't right now, from either Iran nor Israel. And yes, there's a Reuters story quoting an Iranian official, but still nothing from Israel. Can you make sense at all of how this word is getting out publicly?
Well, you're quite right. The rules have changed exponentially. The lack of message discipline has been breathtaking through this whole enterprise. When you had the president, as I said, use the term "we control the skies," referencing the United States and Israel together, even as we had tried to distance ourselves. When you had the president talk about regime change on social media, thereby really sending people into a tizzy, since he'd had senior officials, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, and the Vice President very specifically say we were not supporting regime change. And then you get this announcement without official corroboration. So lack of message discipline, I can assure you, is driving my colleagues in the State Department and beyond a little bit crazy. However, if this can be concluded in this way, it solves a problem for the president and the United States, but again, without the Israelis signing on to it yet. And what does that mean for them? It's still up in the air.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt. Keep going, please.
No. I was going to add, you'll recall, though, that President Biden on more than one occasion announced Israeli acceptance or called plans for a ceasefire, an Israeli plan, and then the Israelis didn't sign on to it, backed out of it. So this kind of preemptive announcement to get people to come along is not unprecedented.
We have less than a minute, but I'm really interested in your insight on a question I think a lot of us have. What should we be looking for next?
We should be watching for the Israeli response. We should be watching to see if there is a ramp up of attacks, as often is the case, just before a ceasefire. And then, of course, whether what's hit, what casualties are like, could put that ceasefire in jeopardy if indeed Israel agrees. And then we need to pay attention back to the Gaza Strip.
Really nice having your insight on this developing story. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley is a former U.S. ambassador, and she joined us from Cleveland. CBC's Chris Brown is in Jerusalem. He joins us live. And Chris, it's been a long day. You thought the day was over. Many of us did think the day was over. At this point, what do we know about Trump's ceasefire announcement?
Well, what's notable, I think, is that we haven't heard anything at all from the Israelis. It's 2:30 in the morning. You could say that's why, but that's actually not the case. It often seems to me that Israel runs on Eastern Standard Time back in North America because it's so attuned to the U.S. political system and how things work there. Except this news has been out now for a little bit, and we have heard nothing from Benjamin Netanyahu, nothing from his defense minister, nothing from really anyone who you would think you would hear something from. And not only that, we've also seen social media images and know for a fact that Israel had attacks ongoing at the time over Iran. Also, I should say, it also appears Iran had drones in the skies over the northern part of Israel while all this was playing out. There has been some perhaps more quantifiable confirmation, if you will. Iranian officials telling Reuters, yes, we agree to this, but it's radio silence so far. And as I say, that would be very surprising because this government is on all the time.
Yeah, that's really interesting insight, Chris. And you also think about the fact that it appeared that Israel had an early warning of the United States' plans to bomb those 3 sites in Iran. I mean, Israel and the United States, clearly 2 countries that are in lockstep on a lot of foreign policy maneuvers in the Middle East. I don't know if this is an unfair question to ask you in the early hours of the morning here when so much is uncertain. You tell me. But what do you make of the fact that we haven't heard from Israel on this?
Well, what this makes me think of is when Donald Trump announced a ceasefire with the Houthis a couple of months ago. That was also came out of nowhere and was posted on his social truth page. And people were wondering, what does that mean? It turns out his ceasefire with the Houthis was with the United States. It wasn't actually with Israel, and the Houthis continued to attack. We know Donald Trump likes quick wins. We know he likes to pick the low-hanging diplomatic fruit. He was after a ceasefire in Ukraine, but without really trying to get a permanent end to the war. He pushed for and got, in the very early stages of his second term, a ceasefire with Hamas, which didn't last. And not only did it not last, it didn't actually deal anything with any of the fundamental causes or a solution for what was going to happen to Gaza after the war. So this is why people are probably going to wait and be healthily skeptical about this until they see some response from the Israelis. Some of the timings in this are also make you wonder, I have to say, Ian. I mean, he said the ceasefire will come into effect in 6 hours. I think he said that for Iran, and then 12 hours after that for Israel, and then the whole thing would be called the 12-day war and it would be over. So this does not sound like something the Israeli side would have written. Your previous guest was talking about agreements that would have to follow in terms of the whole nuclear program. Well, that was not really what Israel wanted going into this. They wanted hard, firm guarantees that this was not going to end up as a program that could a nuclear program that could be turned into weapons. So again, these are reasons not to say this isn't happening, Ian. Just to be cautious.
Yeah, and listen, having someone with your perspective and experience on this is really helping us kind of figure out where we're at with the uncertainty at this late hour here in Canada, early hour where you are in Jerusalem. Chris Brown, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian.
All right, William Wechsler is a senior director of the Rafik Hariri Center and Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council. He's also a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations and Combating Terrorism with the U.S. Department of Defense. He joins us now live from Washington. Your reaction, first of all, to this social media post by the president?
Well, it needs to be confirmed by both Israel and Iran, but on the assumption that it does hold, it's good news. I would also assume, and we don't know this, but it's an educated guess, that what Iran was also offering was a restart of the negotiations. And the price for those negotiations was the United States' insistence that Israel stop its attacks. That's how Iran and its proxies typically approach negotiations. Most of the time, it's not accepted. My guess is in this time it was accepted, and that's why we're seeing a ceasefire. And hopefully the next announcement we'll see is negotiations about to begin.
If this ceasefire is real, if it holds, this would be, I think, but I'm interested in your view on this, a huge victory for Donald Trump and his use of military intervention.
Well, it's definitely a lesson learned about how to combine military pressure, strength in order to advance negotiations. The negotiations have to start, and we'll only know if it's a strategic victory if the overall objective is reached. That overall objective is that Iran can no longer possess and provide an existential threat to Israel and the rest of the region through its pursuit of nuclear weapons. That's what has to happen at the end of these negotiations.
Everything is moving so quickly here. I want to take a step back to what we thought was going to be the major topic of the conversation this evening, and that is the missile attack on the U.S. base in Qatar. It apparently, none of those missiles landed. Apparently, Iran had told Qatar that these missiles were coming. It almost seems performative on the part of Iran to show some kind of retaliation, but to make sure that retaliation didn't have any or much of an impact. What's your view on what happened there?
Performative is exactly the right way to describe this. And in order to make sure that the performance proceeded with the minimal amount of risk, Iran picked its most trusted partner, Qatar, to design the play in front of us. The play was one that no one was killed, very little damage was done. Most of the projectiles were shot out of the sky, but Iran successfully crossed the same Rubicon from their perspective that the United States had crossed. The United States attacked them directly. They attacked the United States directly. Neither of those two things had happened before. Now both of them have happened. So now, again, the way that I interpret this is a de-escalatory move by Iran. The United States has responded with another de-escalatory move with the ceasefire. The next thing that we should expect is the negotiations to begin. If they don't begin, we're still in a big problem.
And let's finish with an expansion on that last thought on your part, because I think a lot of people who are watching now have this question. So through your eyes, what are you looking for next?
If these negotiations begin, they can only end in three ways. They can end with Iran blinking, they can end with Trump blinking, or they can end with no deal. Iran blinking would mean a deal that they would sign that commits them to zero enrichment of nuclear fuels. That's what everyone wants to see. That's what everyone in the region wants to see. And that should be the answer in order for the regime to maintain its position and to survive another day. They are in a very weak position. They need to accept that. If Trump blinks, then there will be a deal that accepts something less than that. That will be a real strategic mistake if that's what happens. And that will turn a tactical victory that we're seeing today into a much more complicated and negative story, because then Iran will be back into this situation and only. The last scenario is that there is no deal, and in which case the level of conflict will continue again, and the ceasefire, I suspect, would end.
Well, you've made a complex and uncertain situation very clear, at least in terms of what's happening now and what to look for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
William Wechsler, Senior Director of the Rafiq Hariri Center and Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council.